allegiance? Sure. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's take roll. I don't think so either. We're just
Not
gonna
for study session. There's no quorum or any.
All right, study session, let's start out first topic, Festival Beer Garden Agreement. We had a request from the firefighters union to make an adjustment to the agreement in the last month's meeting, and we tabled it for a discussion, and today is the discussion.
Do you want me to chime in on?
Yes, please.
Before you get started, thank you, Irene, Kaylee, and whoever else provided all of the backup information, because I was searching high and low and I couldn't find Jeff. So. Go ahead.
So, in essence, and as everybody knows who was here at the last session, the beer garden agreement was entered into with the firefighters union, and it had certain payment terms, and essentially they came out a bit short after the actual fest. And the request was whether we could modify those payment terms to put them in a better place. So I did do a little bit of background research on this. I shared some emails prior to this meeting with my legal opinions, and the real legal concern here is that this was put out as a request for a proposal, which that was the purchasing or the contracting method that this body chose. We only received one response for that RFP, which was from the firefighters union. But nonetheless, it's possible we could have gotten 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. And had we gotten those additional requests, we don't know what the terms of those requests would have been. But if we were to modify the contract after the fact, the decision to do so would have certainly had an effect on the competitive process, essentially. And that's really the concern under the law. Ordinarily, you're not allowed to modify, make material modifications to the terms of a public contract after it's been entered into. Well, what's a material modification? You know, if you've got a contract for services or to construct something, for example, there's going to be change orders, and the law specifically states that, you know, that contract amount can't change more than 20% in the instance of something like a change order. But here what we've been asked to do is really fundamentally alter the terms of the original agreement, and that served as a basis for bidding. My legal opinion is that that would constitute a material modification to the contract, and that we shouldn't do it, and legally we probably can't do that. Another question that arose was, and I think that it's probably really the substance of the conversation today, is just the union has stated, well, we didn't know how the event was going to be structured before we entered into this, and you know, that probably is an issue with the way the park board plans, and maybe we should have had that spelled out a little bit more clearly before we did the RFP. Nonetheless, there is an opportunity for the contractors to inquire about the activity and whether the terms of the activity had been finalized prior to submitting their responses to the RFP. And it seems like the union assumed that, you know, the status quo would be maintained for this activity, and it just so happens it wasn't. There's an integration clause in the agreement, which basically means the agreement is the whole agreement, and any conversations, parole evidence is what that's referred to generally in the contracts, agreements, anything that didn't end up in here in writing, it really has no effect, no bearing on what did end up in writing. So I really think that the law is pretty clear on the issue. I understand their concerns. I'm just not sure what we can do about it. So that's my commentary on the contract itself, if anybody's got any discussion or questions.
So within the contract, it does say we could change it by 20%.
The contract itself doesn't say that we can change it by 20%. I think there is a clause in there that allows for amendments. It's part of the state law that basically says you absolutely can't make changes of more than 20%. But the case law also is pretty clear that anything that would be a material modification to the contract, especially that would potentially affect the bidding terms, the competitive nature by which the contract was bid out, that really violates the purpose and intent of these procedures that we use to bid out contracts and to make them competitive. So, you know, if we were to change this, I think it would thwart the whole intent of having an RFP is really what it comes down to.
So I'm just going to play devil's advocate here. At what point do you ladies remember, at what point was it decided that there was going to be the entrance fee? That it was a done deal, it was decided that we were going to charge this?
I can't give you like an exact date.
Sure, I
when it
don't
happened.
expect an exact
Right.
date,
Well,
but like
there
timeframe.
was so much back and forth with this because it wasn't just involving us.
Mm-hmm.
This was now all department heads, you know, anybody who wanted to have a say in it. We started talking about this right after last year's events.
Yes.
So one thing I can say is that I did have a discussion with Colin about the possibility, but I didn't until after, you know, we were all on board with it. And yes, like I said in my email, that was after he submitted his RFP.
So just what I want to say and what I want to point out is that when Colin submitted this on February 24th, and it was accepted by the town on March 4th,
Right.
I'm fairly certain we did not know at that point that we were going to charge it. It was a discussion. Like
Right.
you said, we started discussing this
Exactly.
after last year's event, and
Right.
I was in favor of this entrance fee. However, I can't look past the fact that somebody entered into a contract,
Right.
and the terms of the event that they have been facilitating this beer garden for over a decade has changed.
Right.
And so when they did execute this, that was unknown at that point.
Right. I
And
guess the only thing.
And we gave them, this is our contract, it's not like they brought their own contract to us.
Right.
They were given one. And I, again, devil's advocate, am just saying that if it was a known thing in the end of February, beginning of March, when this was executed, had they known then they would have had an opportunity to put something in here, a clause of some type that, you know, if this fee does become something.
Right. I guess-
Or take the original contract as is and modify what you're offering.
Right.
If you're not gonna offer 7,500 or whatever the number was, then, yeah.
Because without looking back into our minutes, again, devil's advocate here, if this was signed off by the town, by Troxel, on March 4th, I'm assuming this was brought to us at the April meeting, because March 4th would have been after, right, our
Correct.
March meeting. We didn't know at that time that you were charging the fee.
Nobody knew.
So we couldn't have
Right.
even said at that point, well, wait a minute.
Right.
We just decided that we're charging, I just want to point out that it was never brought to us that there was going to be the fee, even though I think all three of us sitting here were in favor of this fee.
Right.
It might have been discussed with the department heads, but your park board
Right.
was not made aware.
Right. I guess my only thing with the contract and the RFP is the fact that it doesn't state anything about like layout or what's being brought in, what's not being brought in. So I think that's where that gray area is because it's never been discussed. So now we change something and now, you know what I mean? Like it's an issue. So is that something
But
we
I-
need to put in for future?
I think so. I was thinking that too, because, you know, when I was looking at the contract, I'm like, well, there's really nothing that says we can't make changes, but there's also nothing that says, you know, this is what it's going to be. If we change it, things are going to change. So
Right.
I think that is something we need to look for in the future, and I feel like we need to use this as a lesson, like a learning lesson. And I know you're kind of saying that it doesn't affect on the legal standpoint, but I know, you know, I used to be vendors at crafts, you know, craft shows and stuff, and I would be upset too if you thought it was going to be run a certain way, and then you get there and it's, you know, different. Before you make your payment, decide what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. So, I mean, I can see where the fire department is coming from.
Right.
I think, you know, I agree with that entirely. I feel like, you know, from a legal standpoint right now, our hands are kind of tied, but what I would say is maybe it would behoove us in, you know, the coming year to restructure the contract in a way that maybe provides a little bit more flexibility for the, you know, the potential service providers to put their own terms on the table. Because right now, basically what our contract said was $7,500 is a given, and then you specify what you're really bidding on or competing on is the percentage
Right.
that, you know, that they would give from the revenues. Maybe we open that up a little bit to allow for more flexibility in case other contingencies arise. I don't recall this year how many other, we had the entrance fee, right, that was kind of undecided upon when this was done, but how many other factors in putting together the fest were still at play at
Right.
that point? Were there a lot of things that were still being shuffled around and decided? Because, you know, you could also make the argument that, well, there was a lot of planning to do, and any one of those planning elements could have had an effect on the revenue. So anybody that enters into this is sort of rolling the dice. I mean,
Christian, prior to the festival with a signed contract, what's to stop them from approaching us going, hey, you're charging an entrance fee? And we need to reopen what we've signed and
so basically what you're saying is, could they have backed out?
could they have backed out and said, hey, you guys are gonna charge an entry fee, you're gonna kill our attendance, and it looks like we're not gonna be able to do the 7,500, and we want a different split, and we wanna talk about other things.
Well, let's see, what we'd be looking there for, so termination cancellation, 13. The town can terminate in the event the vendor fails to comply. There's a section for termination for violation of law. I think that, you know, applies to the vendor. It doesn't really,
Okay.
it doesn't really say much about vendor termination rights. You know, in circumstances like that, you can always come back and say, look, I think I just entered into a raw deal. Can
Yes.
we'd like to negotiate a withdrawal.
I didn't see anything in here that said,
I don't think there is, and that's probably intentional because you don't really want the vendors to
Backing out.
back down. But that being said, it's not a, you know, I wouldn't say it's a super punitive contract or anything like that. I mean, it's not really written in such a manner to really bop anybody over the head. But once the agreement is entered into, there's always the possibility of the parties simply saying, all right, we'll agree to let you out of this. I mean, that can be done, in which case you probably have to rebid it, but
or at least hear what the grievance is and make a decision about how we're gonna go forward.
yeah, I mean, you could terminate it, rebid the action under
Okay.
different terms. There are possibilities. The problem is just, you know, once you've entered into that, then unless somebody tries to terminate it or tries to back out, those are the terms.
So Christian, in your legal opinion, even though they entered into a contract not knowing the details of the event or the details changed, they have no recourse? And again, I bring this up because they have done this event for over 10 years. So and I know you should never assume, but there is a level of assumption that it's going to be status quo.
Right.
There's an assumption, maybe, but the reason that you make representations and warranties in a contract like this is so that all of the assumptions are on the table, essentially. You try to minimize that as much as possible. And, you know, we do have sections in here, maybe it doesn't pertain directly to this situation, but where the town has spelled out that, you know, we don't make representations and warranties with regard to certain things, like the COVID-19 risk was specifically written in there. Performance warranty, the vendor warrants that the services rendered will conform to the requirements of the agreement. You know, ordinarily what I would be looking for in there is some sort of provision that states, for example, the town represents and warrants that the activity is set up in a certain way, and or that there's a contingency that allows them to back out under certain conditions. I just don't think that we've got anything in here that they could really hang their hat on. I mean, what you do have is, let me see if I can find it here real quick. Normally there's an integration clause in here, and entire agreement, 14.7. This agreement represents the entire agreement of the parties with respect to its subject matter, and all previous agreements, whether oral or written, entered into prior to this agreement, are hereby revoked and superseded by this agreement. No representations, warranties, inducements, or oral agreements have been made by any of the parties except expressly set forth herein or in any other contemporaneous written agreement executed for the purposes of carrying out the provisions of this agreement. And it goes on, but that no representations, warranties, inducements, or oral agreements have been made. Something like reliance on what happened last year would fall under that box. It's basically enter into at your own risk. What you see on this paper is what you get. And now that the activity is concluded, I think that, you know, if you did make a change, the whole reason that the law is pretty strict on that is if you did make a change after the activity had concluded, once somebody decides that the outcome was not to your liking, well, everybody's going to want that.
But can I say one thing? We never, just to any vendor, I'm not even talking about them, we're never guaranteeing that anybody makes a certain amount of money. And we've had some food vendors, crafters have been there for years. That's kind of, I would think, at your own risk. I know it's not like stated in there exactly, but these are the risks as a business certain people take. So honestly, I don't think it had anything to do with the tickets, not to get all into that, but I understand how we lost 2 days. I have been discussing it with other staff members too, and we talked about maybe having it split, like a price per day. So then we have the opportunity to go back and say, okay, Wednesday and Thursday was canceled, whatever that 7,000, there's a portion that can be cut off of that, according to the contract. So, that might be a little more helpful. But, to just generally say, like, you guys had a Friday and Saturday night, and because we charged a fee, you didn't make any money, that's an assumption, like you said. And I don't think that contracts have rooms for assumptions. It's kind of a black and white.
Yeah, if you bake the assumption into the contract, that's
Right.
one thing.
Yeah,
But if it's not in there, it's just not in there.
exactly.
And there is a lot of risk with activities like this. I know in this instance, I think the assertion is, well, this was a element that was under our control, but, by the same token, do we really know that the entrance fee is what caused lower attendance? Is there any way to actually show that?
Right.
Maybe we can get an indication.
Yeah.
We might have an entrance fee at a future activity and have it be an absolute blowout.
Right.
You
You don't know. And I know another thing they brought up was bands, like Saturday bands weren't, the same as they had been in the past. So now, can you argue that too? That because we changed the band, so now going forward, do we have to, I guess, I don't want to say permission, but like showing them these are the bands, do you want to still do this?
If we have to write up a contract like that, then there's
I
really no
I
sense,
feel
there's
like
no
it's
sense in
getting
doing it. But
too much now.
I
It
think,
it seems like a lot of legwork for the specifics that we're talking about here, because Irene's absolutely right in the sense of the bans was a big thing they brought up, and at the end of the day, a lot of the claims that were made are opinion-based, they're assumptions. I could argue that it was the weather that did it, because we saw a crowd. Our crowd was huge, and it seemed to only really affect them. So if we have to get super specific, like this day we're having this band, this band, this band, that could also not work out because sometimes bands have to pull out. I feel like there's a lot of different variables that can affect that.
I don't even know how you would do that from a legal perspective in crafting a request for proposals.
Right.
and not
But
that
are we giving them too much control now?
Yeah.
well, we're getting into a contract that is that thick and
Exactly.
not worth
I
what
don't
it's
think
printed on.
any company really does that.
But before
That's a
we
lot.
get off into what we're off into right now, which we need to do, talk about bands, talk about what the entry fees and all those things that were somewhat valid. I don't know how valid they were with this, and I don't think anybody can say. But before we get off and try to fix the problem, we still have this problem in front of us. And if anybody else has anything else to say about
Well,
this.
I think, with this, it's, like, I want to do it from a legal standpoint because I totally understand we can't have everybody coming. When you do these things, you do take on a risk. But this is our fire department, and they're not making a profit off of this, right? Like, they're donating a lot of the money that they make, and they're not upset that they didn't make a lot of money. They're coming because they have a loss. And so that's the part that feels, I guess, yucky, for lack of a better word, to me, is that here they are trying to, they donate a lot to our town. They're essentially doing us, and I know we have opportunity for other bids, but we don't have them. And, I think the town likes to have our fire department there. I think it's good for the Schererville Fest to have the fire department there. And I would like to do it legally, but also, just looking at the circumstance, it's not like a vendor. This isn't their job. They don't go around assuming all these risks, and what they lack in one festival, they'll make up in another. This is like one of the, I don't know if they do this anywhere else, but, it's like a one-time thing. And for them to have to, reach into their pocket and pay to be there, I just don't like that. My other question was the porta potty stuff. Do other vendors have to pay for porta potties?
No, they pay for the porta potties that they have in their section. So they have some behind it's like for their people. They're not paying for our porta
But
potties.
do we require them to do that?
No,
They do that for themselves?
they do that for themselves, yes. It's just another thing they've always done. But I mean, that's why too, I gave the suggestion, I don't know if we can do this, but if, I understand the first 2 days, everybody took a loss. So is there a way to divide this? It was 7,500, so it'd be like 1,500 a day. And then two, we can also look into the donations that they did give to us, because we do appreciate that. So I mean, that could be a factor to take off of that. And then you come up with a number and hopefully everybody's happy.
Right.
So-
Or if we could reduce it by 20% legally, because you said we could,
Well, see, that's more in the terms of like a change order for a project. You're working on building something, and there's cost overruns. There's a finite cost overrun. I don't think that would, anything that you do with this one is by its very nature going to change the terms that were used for competitive bidding. And that's really where the problem comes in. And I know that, there were some proposals to see if we could, maybe mitigate the effects with a donation or something like that. And I did do a little bit of digging on that, and I just don't, we have the authority to accept donations, but I don't see that we have the authority as a governmental body that we're granted the authority to lend donations back like that.
To that point, Irene, the 7,500 is a real number, and it was generated for a specific purpose. If I start trading $7,500 for candy, I'm going to be short paying bills, and I'm sure that you and your coworkers don't accept candy as pay. I'm a little worried that the 7,500 is there for a reason. And it's to fill a
Right.
budget need for us, and we plan around that budget.
Well, their donation wasn't just candy, it was more, you're just using an
Yeah,
example,
I'm
okay.
just talking, no.
Yeah.
And grateful
Right.
for it.
We really do
I'm not-
appreciate that.
But that doesn't replace contractually what we were looking for in our budget.
Right. I agree.
What is the, so the bottom line number that they owe us is,
The 9.
$9,148.48.
okay, and after they pay that, they're saying that they come up $2,816.11
Short, right.
Where's the, oh, next page.
Right.
Now, the other thing, and I know that it's something that they want to do, but, you know, they are showing charity donations of $37.50. I don't know if they made commitments to that, you know, beforehand.
They do.
But that's, you know, they've made certain commitments here that perhaps from their end ought to be contingent because they don't know what the outcome is. You know, in this year it was what, 8% was their
Yes.
their rate? You know, and if they're truly the only ones bidding on this, then, you know, maybe in future years they want to take a higher percentage because they're not sure they'll make their money back. And if they're the only one that puts in the bid, we may very well accept that.
And again, to remediate this contract, there's a lot of things, because anything less than 7,500, according to this contract, is not a qualified bid. So maybe we need to modify that again for next year and years on. I don't know how we solve this problem today.
To your point, do you know where, I don't know how long ago it was that we came up with 7,500 figure, if that was, you know, based on some concrete calculation of,
It was probably backed into after years of not having a fixed fee and just profit sharing back and forth.
Well,
And
I know, I think it was last year, it was 7,000. It's slowly been climbing.
so maybe that, you know, in future years, we could think about freezing that, or, I don't know, if lessening it would be on the table, and they might want to think about taking the rate from, you know, 8% to something different.
50, if you truly want to go at it.
Right. So in 2021, their guarantee was 6,000. In '22, it went up to 7,000, and it stayed that way for 4 years. And then, so it was this year that it went up to 75.
Were they always at 8%? Has that?
No,
consistent?
they fluctuate, because, you know, they get to pick. They've been at 10 first 2 years, 8, 10, and then 8 the last 2 years. So,
So is there any way that we can figure out to credit them, or whatever terminology you want to use, so that they at least are at a zero of this 281611 figure? I mean, as a board, can we make that decision to credit that?
I don't see how you can, to be perfectly honest. Now, the only ambiguity that I saw that I think came up in the emails, and I don't know if it was clarified or not, was, you know, this said, town will collect 8% of total gross sales from the vendor. There was some commentary about tips. Did we figure out how the numbers were working out on that?
I think Irene said that they don't get charged on tips, correct? Like, that's not their gross?
no, I don't, no. We have never, and I know there's nowhere in the contract that says that they have to give us our tips,
okay.
yeah.
Because
So-
I did do the math, and it was a little off, and that's probably where, because the tips.
There was also something else too. So they put charity donations at $3,750. They did give us charitable donations in the sum of $2,350. but only $750 of that was for Fest. So all of those other contributions, I personally do not think should be listed in this Fest breakdown, because that is not an expense that was for Fest.
This Fest breakdown?
So,
No, this is from when the firefighters did their breakdown.
on this page, so you're,
Yes.
you're saying that this is incorrect, that this 3750, they have inflated this.
Yes, they gave us just 2,350, and 750 of that was for Fest.
I don't understand.
When they said they donate to the burn camp and the fire buddies and all that, that's what I understood their donations.
That's what I thought it was as well.
And I was understanding that anything in this on this piece of paper is directly related to the Fest and the beer garden. That's it.
And I don't
I
think it
believe this
is.
3750, and I could be incorrect, but this is what Robin is talking about.
About
This
the
is
burn.
What they have dedicated, you know how every year they pick those charities ahead of time, each night
Yes.
it goes to a certain charity. That's what I assumed this to be.
That's what I assumed.
Not charitable donations to your departments over the course of the year or whatever.
Right.
This is what they donated out because they committed, and Christian has a.
You could 100% be
has
right.
a-
I didn't hear him say that, but I could have just missed that.
Christian has a valid point that, you know, they made those commitments prior to knowing what
Right.
the revenue was going to look like and the profit was going to look like. However, they did make these commitments, and this is a great organization that does good things for our community.
Absolutely.
And they dedicate their profits, I'm not saying all of them, but a good portion of their profits every night to go to a great charitable cause. And I have a lot of feelings about that, and I would like to see us at least help them to not be in the negative after they held their word. They could have told these organizations, listen, we're gonna be in the red, we can't honor our commitment to donate to your organization. And they still did that.
So I do have a question about sort of their calculations. When we're looking at their revenue, they've got, so they've got ticket sales, tips and donations,
There's tips.
total revenue, and then they compare total revenue
Exactly my point.
from total expenses. When they come up with the fee owed to the town, that 9148, how did they calculate that number? Has anybody done the math on that?
I have not, but it would be 7,500, right? The base.
Minus 7,500 and
Minus
then whatever.
7,500. the
We
base
did
fee.
notice a discrepancy. I think Jen referred to this earlier. For one of them, I don't know if this was, I don't think it was intentional, but for one of the total amounts, they included tips and donations, and then on the other, they didn't. So the numbers were a bit off, and that should be noted.
So if we take their 2606 times 8%, that gets us to 1648.48 plus 7,500. Does that get us to the?
Yeah, that's where you get the
9,000.
nine.
Okay, so I'm not sure that they really would have needed to include that information about tips and donations. Maybe that's just for information purposes. but-
Maybe are they using that to show the bottom, the red? Maybe that's why it's coming in.
Total revenue.
Well,
it
if they had
wasn't-
taken that out, then,
Worse.
you know, it would look even worse.
Right, so
Um,
that's what I'm saying, they left that in to show that, you know, not inflate what they're
Yeah,
losing out
fair
on.
enough.
To show that, we had tips, that we didn't give you the 8%, because that number matches. And then, so then after the expenses, you know, could look worse if they didn't put the tips, but they did. And that's maybe why they added that. That's what it is. Total revenue, total expenses, and then the net loss, because they put the tips in the total revenue.
So even though that's not in the contract.
But not in the expenses.
It's not in the contract that they have to include their tips and donations.
No, I think that was just
Well,
for,
that's
But
just
they
for the
did,
8%.
to show us.
yeah, I was hoping they had made a math error maybe
Gotcha.
that would inflate our numbers and we could say, hey, look,
Right.
we revise it down. But it looks like they did it correctly, so that doesn't really help.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go back to the 20%. So it's a hard no that we can't say because we were not as forthcoming it's fine. I'm not saying, but when it's a bidding process, it's different than just,
So the purpose of the 20% threshold is, let's say you're building a building and somebody bids $100,000 and they get the bid on the basis of that. And that includes, their work costs, their material costs, et cetera. And then halfway through the project, material costs go up or they find out they need to construct the building in a different manner, and then they come to you and say, well, sorry guys, we can't do this within the cost framework we've been given. We're going to have to put in this additional work, and it's going to be $10,000 more. In those circumstances, you can do like a change order that would be a modification to the contract, and it would be upwards. But that's really a different circumstance than what we're dealing with here is basically I bid the job and I bid it too low and I walked out with a loss and whoops. That's really what we've got. And it's unfortunate. I don't think anybody would have anticipated it, but
so what if we come back and we say we have to, stay within the terms, I get it.
So what is that encompassing?
They end up in the red this year,
Oh, because it's just a share.
and then next year we lose them completely. Is that something that we're willing to lose, to risk?
Not that, I understand what you're saying. The beer garden for Schererville Fest has turned into an RFP legally. Other competing vendors, and this is going back, have stayed away specifically for this fest because it's the firemen. And I'm not saying that we're gonna have 50 people to show up, because I think we see the problem with having any beer vendors doing any of our events, but I know way back, people who were previous bidders, when they realized who else was bidding and what they do with the money, saw it wasn't worth it to be competing against them. So I would hate to lose. I'd hate to have that kind of relationship with the fireman or another town employee, but this is still a competitive bidding process, and that $7,500 means something.
I think the 7,500 is, I'm thinking more of the 8% type of,
I understand.
I know a flat fee is a flat fee, everybody would get that, they got to decide the percent. I don't know.
Yeah, if we were not a government entity, I'd say cut them the best break you can, because you'd have all the leeway in the world to do that. But what really ties our hands is, once you've committed to that RFP process and you've chosen your method by which you're going to take those bids, then it's pretty locked in. And, what we could certainly do is, now, we can't go to them and say, if you guys, in particular, submit a bid next year, we'll, make sure you get a great deal. But what we can say is, next year, generally, we will make sure that the terms of the RFP that are offered are much more favorable, so this doesn't happen again to anyone.
That might in turn bring somebody out of the woodwork.
It could.
But that's still our prerogative to say who's a responsible and competitive bidder. So that's within our power as the board.
I don't know if we've ever used what's the amount of the contract here? It's really not that great.
More paper than dollars.
Yeah, there might be,
I don't know if we need to do an RFP.
well, that's what I was wondering. Maybe there's alternative methods that we could use for the process next year that would cut out the RFP altogether. What was the total? Well, the problem is, though, we don't know how much the contract is ultimately going to be worth, because it's based on a revenue share. But, I could look into that to see if it could be restructured under the purchasing laws.
At least to see whether or not we're required to do an RFP, and whether
Yeah.
we can assign somebody. And that would, again, give us some leeway, and that'll give us a little bit more power and our own discretion.
Okay, so let me ask something that might be silly. I trust Christian will tell me if I'm being silly. If they were to win the bid, or however we want to term that, for next year, could we say now that we will reduce their flat fee
I don't think so.
by this?
No, I don't think so, because it's got to be part of the bid package. That's, because even if we know there's only one bidder from year to year, it's just got to be a level playing ground is the way the public purchasing laws work. For minimal amounts like this, I mean, there might be an alternative method. I didn't bring my public purchasing handbook with me, but a lot of those measures for how you're required to bid out jobs depend on the amount of money that's at play, and there might just be a different way to structure this. Another, I mean, well, I was going to say, it could even be structured such that the bidder has to walk home with X amount. That would put the town at risk, though. That's the
Right.
Yeah.
the problem there. And you could, if you did that, though, or if we accepted bids like that, that amount, I'm sure for the fire department, they're not looking to make a bundle. They might say, well, we need to make $3,000 off of this. Whereas a private contractor might say, no, I'm not doing it unless I make 20.
Yeah.
Hence, there's not a lot of bidders in an open RFP for a beer garden for 4 days, 5 days.
Yeah.
Well, could they bid where they're paying a percentage on the net profit versus
Right.
gross?
Can we restructure that so the flat fee is
Yeah, I think you
less?
could do that. It's really up to us how, what we want the requirements for the RFP to be.
We set the terms for 7,500 based on budget reasons. If,
And that's concrete. They know you're going to pay that. It's
Right.
the 8% of you don't know what that's,
Correct.
Yeah, so maybe that would be a good, a good solution. You're only paying off of your net.
Or is strictly 50/50.
Or
off of
strictly
whatever,
50/50.
But that has to go, as Irene has to still run the department, she can't go into the negative on
Yeah.
an event. So that would involve a lot of talking and going back through some old,
well, I would think when you're budgeting, is it more, you budget with the flat fee, not the percent anyway? Like, that's, you guys wouldn't know either, I mean,
We don't always factor it in.
right.
We're looking at more of our expenses. What are we paying for staff? Every little thing, like I said, bands, renting of tents, all that stuff. So we're looking at our expenses. Once things start rolling in, that's when we start adding that in, so.
I guess another, if we were budgeting even based off net, we'd have to decide what net means, because I know they want to make charity donations, but they're not technically expenses.
True. I think that's fair. That's something I would like to talk to them, like, how do they decide ahead of time that that's the amount they're gonna give for the charity donation? Or, Nicole, you think it's just what they made that night?
I think it's
They-
based off what they make that
That
night.
night?
Don't quote me on that, though.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And bathrooms, that's their option. That's what they like to do. Okay. Oh, yeah, you're right. Because I was thinking, was that from when it was enclosed and they had to provide their own porta potties when it was enclosed and now it's open? Was that just not taken out? That is what I was thinking when I read that. That's not the case? Robin, where did you say that was again? 4?
Second page of the RFP, item number 5. So that's another part of the contract, right, that's just another part of the contract that they're tied to. Any bidder is tied to.
But do you think that was in the contract before because we had an enclosed beer garden? And it's something that needs to be updated? If that's why they did it, I don't know. Now
Right.
these are like,
Yeah.
I'm not,
I'll be honest, I think all of our contracts need to be updated.
Okay.
We're just finding
yeah.
it's just, the world changes, so there's
Yeah,
things
no,
you
I
gotta change
understand.
with it, yeah, so.
Of course. So I think that's something else we need to just,
And
I'm curious what they're,
Yeah, and I misspoke. According to their RFP, number 5 says that they have to provide a minimum of 4 porta potties
Right.
within the beer garden. But they also, I believe, have their own, maybe it's 1 or 2 behind So that's where they get their grand total of.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mean,
Yeah, because obviously this was in place probably well before you,
yeah, oh, yeah,
so you might not
yeah.
even know for sure if that's why it was, 'cause
Right.
the enclosure.
right. And that's
'Cause
why
that
I'm
makes
saying they need to be
more
updated.
sense, right, like, they won't,
Right,
I would say that would be something they could choose, if they want to have their own, fine, but I think we have plenty of porta
Yeah.
potties, so.
right. Yeah, I don't know why that was put in originally, maybe just it has to do with the beer garden in itself. But like even in number 7 says to provide advertising banners, they don't do that. We've never even looked for them to do that, so.
It just,
Yeah, and this is why I said
Contract that
they
needs to be
need to be
cleaned up.
updated. Definitely.
as we're approaching 6 o'clock, does anyone else have any comments?
I'm good.
I will call the study session closed.